Okay, while people are still joining us, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Autumn to NRAO for this talk. Autumn Guillard is the Cultural Resource Manager for the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, maternal descendant of the Cedar Band of Paiutes, which is a part of the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah. Autumn graduated from Southern Utah University with a degree in anthropology and a minor in psychology, with a master's degree in cultural resource management, specializing in the tribes of the Southwest. Thank you so much for joining us, Autumn, and I will turn this over to you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to introduce myself in Southern Paiute. It's just a cultural formality that we view within our culture, and then we'll go ahead and get the presentation started. So, Maikwas Tegu Venyavan, Nunu Mipian, Delphina Edmoi Hype Sudutsing, Nanjuj, Nunu Mikagu, Nola Zuniga, Nura Sudutsing, and my great grandfather is Nober Zuniga, also from the Cedar Band of Paiutes. So I said, hello, friends. My name is Autumn. My mother's name was Delphina Edmo. Her traditional name was Bluebird, and she was a member of the Cedar Band of Paiutes. My grandmother's traditional name is Beaded Buckskin Dress, and her name is Nola Zuniga, also from the Cedar Band of Paiutes. And her father, which is my great-grandpa, Nober Zuniga, also from the Cedar Band of Paiutes. So what we're going to be learning about today is the amazing Nuwuvi universe, and we're just going to go ahead and just hop right into it. So just a little bit about me. As you guys was informed, I received a bachelor's degree from Southern Utah University, graduated magna cum laude, majoring in anthropology, minoring in psychology. And I do have a master's degree now in cultural resource management from New Mexico Highlands University. I am the very first dark sky ranger that was at Pipe Spring National Monument. So lots of my research that we're going to learn about today was actually collected while I was working for the National Park Service, and now has extended through my position here at the tribe as the Cultural Resource Manager. So I am the lead author and researcher for the Pipe Spring National Monument International Dark Sky Application, which gained certification in the spring of 2021. As I mentioned, I'm a descendant of the Cedar Band of Paiutes, and I gained my passion for the sky through my traditional cultural teachings from my mother and grandmother. So just a little disclaimer before we start getting into the cultural information. So not all information of the night sky will be shared. Some traditional knowledge must be kept for only the Southern Paiute Nation, and this is to ensure the protection and preservation of cultural knowledge for our future generations, as well as those that are living today. If you do work in areas where you speak about Southern Paiutes, or if you work or live in an area where you speak about other Indigenous tribes and their astronomy information, it's always important to reach out to people who are affiliated with that tribe, so that you can get that traditional ecological knowledge firsthand, and you can get a good understanding from our perspective as Indigenous people. So for Southern Paiute people, lots of our stories that relate to constellations or celestial objects are traditional stories that are only told in the winter season. This is very typical for many tribes of the Southwest and the Great Basin. We have seasonal periods where we're allowed to recite our traditional stories out loud, whereas if we're out of that season, we must maintain it in the privacy of our homes. And so Southern Paiutes, we determine winter a couple of different ways. It just depends on which Southern Paiute band you're interacting with. So some of us observe winter by the very first snowfall. So as soon as snow falls on the ground, others, they observe it by snow landing on one of our 4 sacred mountains. So as long as it lands on one of those 4 sacred mountains that's set in our 4 cardinal points of our ancestral homeland, it's winter time. Others, they wait until the winter solstice, so December 21st, and then they start to recite the stories. So it really just depends on the band and the person and what they was taught through their family. So today I may not be able to answer all questions since some information is private. So Native people as astronomers, since the beginning of time, Native people's existence upon our ancestral homeland, we have been interacting with our cultural landscape. It's interesting when you are working in STEM, or if you're working in a social science field. In the early years, a lot of scientists, they were under the impression that Indigenous people did not have a view of science of our own. And so for me, it's always important to mention and to advocate that Native people, we've always understood in a scientific method of how to interact with our natural or our landscapes and our biospheres through astronomy, through botany, through hydrology, through architecture, and through many other fields. So it is through our traditional knowledge and teachings that we achieve the ability to be the first scientists here on this continent. So this was way before Euro-Americans arrived here to start reteaching our ancestors of stuff that they already knew about. And our scientific views, they are critical for teaching our children and our youth that as Native people, we do have a place in fields related to science or STEM. So it has always been a passion of mine to get young people really interested in advocating for them to go to higher education, to become a scientist, to work in fields of science, because we need more minority people in these fields, especially Native people, to advocate for us. So the methodology of the research collected, what we're going to learn about today, a lot of it in the past, pre-1950s, was collected in the manner of ethnography work. You have lots of anthropologists and ethnographers coming to central and southern Utah to specifically seek out the Southern Paiute people to record our information. So luckily enough, this information that was recorded became beneficial to us in our current times. So we also have oral history interviews that were translated about tangible experiences that translated into cultural understanding by these ethnographers. It should be noted that some of the work that was recorded and collected, it was mistranslated, and it was translated in a sense to make it more Americanized, that some of the stories and some of the information that social scientists were learning about or historians were learning about, they felt would have been too problematic or too upfront about how we were speaking about sexualization or human bodies or how we interact as humans. And so they wanted to make it a little bit more softer so that people would be more accepting of it. So this became an issue because our stories relate to us to teach us life lessons. And so if you're removing away those instances, you're removing that life lesson away. Presently, I took an Indigenous archaeological perspective theory of interpreting our cultural landscape as a resource that we currently and prehistorically interact with. So basically understanding that, our traditional cultural properties, our cultural landscapes, they are resources that do need to be protected. And that when we're thinking in terms of natural resources and their connection to Native people, it's not just what we can touch. So it's not, what we can see in front of us. It's not just water. It's not just geology. It's not just plants. It's also looking up at the sky and understanding our place in that universe and how it interacts with our cultural landscape. I also took an applied anthropological perspective when gaining the research. So a lot of stuff that we collected, I actually put it into action. One of the big projects that I worked on was creating a traditional Southern Paiute garden according to the dictation of the sky. So understanding which moon phase to plant in, watching the constellation shift, understanding what season that we're going into, and also being able to estimate when we would be able to calculate the monsoon season. So how we calculate the monsoon season is after the first full moon in June. And then our ancestors knew that those summer rains were going to be coming. Therefore, let's get our food planted so we can capture that precious rainwater. And also researching past articles and oral histories for reference, and using all of the ethnographic tools that I had obtained through my higher education teachings. So the interpretation of the solar system from a Southern Paiute mindset is really understanding that to understand the sky, we have to know our traditional stories. Knowing that those stories connect so closely to what is happening up in the universe really helps you to be able to interpret Native American astronomy. And also understanding the importance of our cultural connection as being a human being within the universe, understanding that we're just this teeny tiny cog in this bigger system, but we all serve an important purpose in the flow of the universe and living symbiotically with that universe. And most importantly, establishing a connection to our ancestors as contemporary Native person. You know, I quite frequently get asked about petroglyph panels and to interpret them and tell us what they mean. And, you know, truthfully and honestly, a lot of them, we don't know what the symbols mean, but a lot of them we do. And one of them is a photo that you see here. A lot of people in the Southwest and some of the other tribes refer to this as a water glyph. You have the Pueblo tribes that view this as an indication of their migratory path, such as the Hopis. They know and recognize this symbol in places that it is on their ancestors' migration path to make it to the Hopi mesas. But what I was taught as a young girl from my grandma is that this is a symbol of the spiral galaxy. So our ancestors already had that perception that we lived in a spiral galaxy and that we are on the Milky Way. And so that's how I see this petroglyph. And I always like to mention that because, you know, it is up for many interpretations from different Indigenous people. So the revitalization of Southern Paiute astronomy, you know, the collection of Southern Paiute astronomy began with a program in cooperation with Pipe Spring National Monument, the Zion Forever Project, and the Kaibat Band of Paiute Indians. And so it was through this cooperation that we was able to get grant funding to hire our very first dark sky intern that you see photographed here with me, Mary Hill. And when Mary started, she had a really big job that included a lot of reading. And so she was tasked with sifting through all of those old ethnography reports and pulling anything that she could find related to verbiage of the Southern Paiute universe, whether if it was about the moon, constellations, planets, songs, traditional dances, whatever it was, we were creating this very large Excel spreadsheet. And so, you know, the main idea was to collect that star information, mainly for the preservation of our cultural knowledge. At this point in time in 2019, we had a tribal elder that was a ranger with me. His name is Ben Pickavit. And he had this idea that we needed to start to revitalize Southern Paiute astronomy. You know, lots of times we will hear phrases like, this is a dying traditional skill. You know, but as Native people, we don't believe that something just dies and disappears. It might go stagnant and might settle for a while, but it's always there for us to pick back up. And that was the case here with the star knowledge. And so here he had put us with the task to say, can you collect this information? Can you create a Southern Paiute universe? And I answered that call. I said, yes, I can do it, but I'm going to need help. And Mary became my first helper. So from what she collected, we were able to create and start that Southern Paiute star chart, or a Nuwuvi universe, or a planisphere, seen through the eyes of our ancestors. So 2020 hits, and we get at a standstill. You know, the whole world is at a standstill, but we didn't want to lose momentum with what we were doing. So I went ahead and I went after another grant, and I was granted another grant where I was able to hire another intern. And so photographed here is Winona Tongates. She's also a young Kaibab Paiute woman. And Winona had a different connection to the sky. So Winona is very artistic, and with her abilities, she was able to start to draw our constellations and to design this planisphere. But she also designed the International Dark Sky logo for Pipe Spring National Monument. And so behind the Windsor Castle, which is the Mormon pioneer fort that sits on the monument grounds, is a traditional Southern Paiute basket rising in the back like the full moon. And you'll see an opening on one side of the red lines there. And that is always to face the east direction to greet the sun as it rises. And then we have the Milky Way stretched across Windsor Castle. And it was Winona's decision that she really wanted to integrate both cultures that made an impact at the monument to be representative and be all inclusive of both. Winona became the very first published Southern Paiute artist with an organization called the Zion Forever Project, along with the National Park Service. And she did this at the young age of 18. And it was through her work that she gained a scholarship to the American Institute of Art University, where she's currently at. And she is excelling. She is on the honor roll and the dean's list, and she's about 2 years out from getting her degree in art. So I am so proud of her and everything that she's done. So let's get into the universe. The Nuwuvi universe. So the word Nuwuvi means the people. It is our true name for ourselves. The word Paiute is a name that was imposed upon us upon Spanish introduction, specifically in 1776 with the Dominguez Escalante expedition. So we decided under the instruction of our elder that he really wanted this to be titled the Nuwuvi universe to represent us Southern Paiute people. So the universe is designed around a 13-month calendar year, counting 13 moons as 1 year. And most of our constellations are appearing in the winter months. And I do believe that that is because of that connection of that storytelling season. And each of our Southern Paiute bands has an interpretation of the constellations. So what we started to discover in the course of our research was that the bands spread throughout central and southern Utah and northern Arizona and throughout Nevada and Southern California, they were interpreting the sky just a little bit differently and uniquely amongst each other. And with the design idea of the Nuwuvi universe, we wanted to include a representation of each of our sister bands. We wanted the entire nation to feel proud about this project and to have something there that spoke from their ancestors. So each cycle is broken up into the 4 seasons. This includes the animals that represent those seasons, the mountain in our 4 cardinal directions that represent that season, plants that are connected to that cardinal point and to a specific season, songs and dances that are also connected to the 4 seasons as well. So this is a very first draft of what we were working with. I don't have the current one out because it's still going through consultation with the other Southern Paiute bands, so it has not been approved for public viewing yet. So we will go to the sun, which is my most favorite. And the traditional name for the sun is Tava. He is a male personification in Southern Paiute astronomy, the husband of the moon, and many traditional stories connect the sun to the cottontail rabbit or to Tavuts, as well as to the traditional plant here on the Colorado Plateau, rabbit brush. So rabbit brush has this beautiful yellow flower that gets very bright and vibrant in the fall season. And traditionally, when we see this bright yellow flower, we know that it's time to go and pick pine nuts. But it is also so bright and yellow because the petals were kissed by the sun. The little cottontail rabbit, traditionally, he had upset the sun, and the sun was throwing fireballs at him. And the rabbit was running around asking everyone if they could give him shelter and safety, and everybody was denying him except for the rabbit brush. And the rabbit brush said, "Sure, come and hide underneath my branches." And so when the sun threw the fireball at the rabbit brush, it kissed those beautiful yellow flowers that we see today. And if you look at the back of a cottontail, you'll see a line that runs from the nape of his neck down close to the cottontail part. That dark line is also where he was burned by the sun when he was trying to hide. So we always honor the sun in our prayers. We always face the eastern direction. We're traditionally taught to rise with the sun, speak to the sun, and say our prayers. Our living structures, the doorways traditionally also face the east so that when the sun rose, that it would guide the light into the home. And watching eclipses can be taboo for some of our bands. You know, the easiest way to explain it is that when the sun and the moon are in eclipse, this is an intimate moment between husband and wife, and we should not be watching them in the privacy of themselves. You know, Creator long ago had upset, or the sun long ago had upset Creator because he was dishonest to his wife, the moon, and was going to commit adultery. So therefore, Creator had separated them, and it is only in eclipse that they're able to have this shared time with one another. So the next one up is the Milky Way, or Mohompoam. It means the spirit road. The Milky Way is one of the most important astronomical objects for our people. It is the path that we follow to the spirit world after we finish our journey here on Mother Earth. So it guides us to the Grand Canyon. We walk across the Milky Way, reach the edge of the Grand Canyon, and are able to jump across the canyon with the help of Coyote's most beautiful daughter, who lives in the constellation Pleiades. The brightest stars that are resting on the Milky Way are the campfires of our family members that have passed on. So we do believe that Creator allows our family and friends to come and rest on the Milky Way and camp and peer down to us in our living and waking lives. The photo that you see in the slide here was taken on the Kaibab Paiute Reservation. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, but this is Mary here facing the Milky Way, and she has an eagle wing, and she has her grandfather's rattle that she is holding while facing that beautiful Milky Way. So Pleiades, or Soni, the rabbit's den, or the rabbit's nest. The Pleiades star cluster is translated as a safe nestling resting spot or a rabbit's den, a protective and safe space for our spirits to rest until our family decides to have our final memorial ceremony, which will release us completely into the spirit world or into the happy hunting grounds. So Alcyon is the brightest star in the cluster, is the one that we believe is a representation of Coyote's daughter. She is the one that I mentioned that waits at the rim of the Grand Canyon to aid the spirit of the deceased Paiutes across the Milky Way to reach where she lives, Pleiades, to rest with her and her sisters, like I said, until that ceremony is completed for us. And Alcyon, the true name in Southern Paiute is Shuni'am. That is the name of Coyote's most beloved daughter. So Coyote relates to Southern Paiutes because we do believe that he had a part in our emergent story. And so he serves as one of our figures in our traditional stories. Basically, Coyote is the brother of the wolf. The wolf, you know, he wanted everything to be good and positive and easy for humans, but Coyote wanted to see a struggle. He wanted women to have pain in childbirth. He wanted humans to know what it felt like to lose someone, to endure that pain. And so Coyote plays also a very large part with us. So Ursa Major, or Nak, which means bighorn sheep, is the personification of a bighorn sheep. The connection to the bighorn sheep as a spirit animal or a medicine animal who is powerful and significant to Southern Paiute cultures. So the easiest way to understand how we view the bighorn sheep is to understand how the Plains tribes connect to the buffalo. It's very important to us. You know, he provides food. His horns are used in ceremonies as well as his hooves. And we believe that he is one of Creator's most beloved sons. And bighorn sheep, depending on what band, they consider that the bighorn sheep to spring from another deity that we refer to as Ocean Woman, and that they may have sprung from her pubic hair. This is mainly viewed from tribes or bands in the Nevada area. Ocean Woman also plays a very important role for Southern Paiutes, as she is connected to the emergent story of the Nevada bands. The Dipper in the Milky Way is the wife, and they were separated far in the heavens because they fought here on earth, causing them to be separated. So again, understanding that our stories are teaching life lessons. So you can imagine hundreds and hundreds of years ago, our ancestors sitting around, and one of our, traditional star holders is sitting there talking about, we shouldn't argue and quarrel in our lives. It can cause us to be separated. We should try our best to get along with each other and live peacefully with one another. So Ursa Minor and Polaris, the North Star, is also a bighorn sheep, Nok. And the North Star is Creator's fearless, courageous son who is boastful with his actions. Basically, how he gets trapped up in the sky is our big red cliffs that we have here in central and southern Utah and northern Arizona. The bighorn sheep is climbing and he gets to the highest peak looking for the best grazing ground. And he sees that he has trapped himself and he starts to worry. And Creator, seeing this, gives pity upon him and takes him and casts him into the sky and turns him into the North Star to always be a guiding light for travelers. This is where you can see the transition of this animal being turned into a higher level spirit. He has moved to an upper echelon figure within our traditional and cultural teachings. And it is through this transition of him turning into the star that we see this. And as I mentioned, he is the most favorite and the most loved son by Creator. So one example of Southern Paiute band interpretations of constellations is Lepus, a constellation that has different interpretation. So the Las Vegas Paiutes views Lepus as a porcupine, and the Chemehuevis view the constellation as a badger. Other bands view the constellation as a rabbit or a hare, just like the Greeks. So this was a really interesting find, because here we seen that two cultures, oceans apart from each other, looked up into the sky and seen a similar depiction like the hare or the rabbit. And so it's really understanding that humans naturally, no matter where we are, we're all thinking on the same wavelength, and that, human nature is just something that is embedded inside of us. The last one is Cygnus or Chkuch, the duck, or known as the swan in Roman Greco astronomy. So Chkuch was first recorded by the anthropologist Isabel Kelly in the interview with a Las Vegas Paiute tribal member in 1932. It was a woman that she interviewed. And Cygnus the swan to the Greeks is a distinct cross-shaped constellation, best seen in the northern hemisphere during the summer and the fall, and the celestial waterfowl swims through the river of the Milky Way. So again, there is that similarity that our ancestors had with the Roman Greco constellations. They're still seeing a waterfowl stretched at the edge of that Milky Way. Ducks are connected to our traditional stories in partnership with coyote. They are known to sing very beautiful songs, and in their ceremonies wear the most beautiful regalia. So, there's a story that's connected to this constellation that was taught to me by my grandma, and I'll just share a little bit with you today. The ducks, they were celebrating and they were dancing around, they were round dancing around their con or their home or their house. And they were singing and they looked so beautiful. And here comes Nosy Coyote, and he's watching them and he's saying, "Oh, look at these big, fat, juicy ducks." And so as the ducks dance by him, he whaps them on their head and he's tying them on his belt because he's going to eat them later. Lastly, there's one duck, and he noticed that he's by himself. And so he tries to get away, but the coyote catches him and rips him to shreds. And as he rips him and he bursts, the duck turns to snow. And the big, fluffy, fat snowflakes that we see in the winter that fall really slowly and silently on the ground, those are the feathers of Chukach after Coyote had torn him and busted him apart. So that's one of my favorite winter stories. But I would like to say my many thanks and appreciation to Pipe Spring National Monument, the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, the entire Southern Paiute Nation, our Southern Paiute elders, my family, the Pipe Spring interpretive staff, the National Park Service, Department of Interior, Zion Forever Project, my interns, Mary and Winona, my mentor, Mr. Ben Pickavet, and to anyone that acknowledges the preservation of Southern Paiute people or Indigenous astronomy. So thank you, Ayuk, and we can open for some questions.
Thank you so much, Autumn.
You're welcome.
This is just beautiful. Thank you. I'll wait to see if anyone else has any questions they want to ask. Okay, well, people are thinking if they have any questions then. I hate to put you on the spot, but as I mentioned before, I am very impressed with the work that you've done with the establishing the dark sky. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, so some of the work that was outside of the scope of creating the Southern Paiute, planisphere was also collecting research to gain that IDA certification. And so, I was one of the very first Indigenous women to be able to get a national park, national monument designated as an international dark sky park. And the whole driving factor with that was that the Kaibat Band of Paiute Indians, their reservation is the very first tribal nation in the entire world to designate themselves as an international dark sky community. So forever ensuring that our dark sky above that area will be forever protected as a cultural resource. And the monument that I was working at sets as a donut hole within the reservation. And so I found that it would only be fitting that the monument followed suit. Unfortunately at that time, the Park Service was really pigeonholing me to only exhibit, we have this Native girl, let's have her sing, let's have her dance, let's have her do these other, only cultural stuff. And a supervisor of mine at that time, he is part Latino and Chiricahua Apache, had said, we really got to get you out of this momentum. What is something we can do to make you stand out? And he said, what are you good at? And I said, well, I know cultural astronomy. And he goes, take it, run with it. And so I really became the driving force in collecting that research. And, it was very intimidating at first. I had completed the application and the research paper that, like we said earlier, is like a thesis document. And I had to go in front of a board of some, a lot of older scientists that are mainly men. And they kind of hammered me down and I had to really stand my ground and fight back. But yeah, it was very interesting, but took me about 2 years, but ultimately got it to happen. So, yeah.
That is so impressive. I think I mentioned that before. I know how much work must have gone into that. And so do you mind just telling us what exactly does it mean to have the dark sky designation?
Yeah, so excuse me, an international dark sky designation. So communities and towns can apply. There's a different application for like communities and towns, but in order to have like a park designated, you have to go through a more stringent process. So this includes you monitoring a light management plan. So seeing how much light pollution the park or the community is putting out. You have to go out and do SQM readings or sky quality meter readings with a little SQM meter. So you're going out at night, you're measuring how dark the sky is. You're understanding the soundscapes during the nighttime in the area that you're trying to designate. So you're also thinking about wildlife that you're trying to protect, plant life that needs the night sky. So everything that's crucially connected to the night sky and the preservation of maintaining it as a natural resource rather than imposing artificial light onto it is basically what you're gearing for.
Oh, that's just so fantastic. I guess, we do something similar with the electromagnetic spectrum, managing and trying to maintain that that kind of environment. So I appreciate that work. So does anyone else have any questions? I don't know if you see the comments. Kaylee has offered some greetings. Thank you, Kaylee. Well, I really appreciate this. This was just fabulous. Thank you so much, Autumn.
No problem. And if anybody has any questions in the future or they come up, I'm gonna just put my email in the chat because I know sometimes, things go really quick, but then you're like, oh, I should have asked that question. So there you go.
Okay, I appreciate that. Actually, I will share that with people as well. And thank you for allowing us to record this. As we'd mentioned, it will only be shared internally, but we have people who often have meetings during lunch and then they say, can I watch it too? So I appreciate you allowing us to do that.
No problem. And then I will share a link with you for the future. I'm going to be doing a live stream with Lowell Observatory. They're going to have somebody with a telescope and then I'll be guiding and then they're streaming it online. So you can see the telescope moving on the celestial objects.
Oh, that would be fantastic.